A cathedral of black stone drifts through the void. 60 decks, 5,000 cabins, a fusion reactor humming like the heartbeat of something ancient and patient. Inside, a war chamber. Red emergency lights pulsing in slow waves. A woman in living armor stands at the navigation console. 7 feet tall, 20 years on the throne. 67 star systems, trembling at the sound of her name. Her shoulder. A blade enters through a seam in her armor that should have been sealed. Surgical. Precise. From someone who knew her bones. She does not scream. She turns. The shadow is already gone, slipping back through a hatch that someone unsealed. Someone she trusted. 3,000 light years away. A small outpost on a forgotten asteroid. A tired doctor finishes a cup of cold coffee. He doesn't know it yet, but the airlock is about to open, and the universe is about to change. I thought I was just fixing a dislocated shoulder. Turns out, I was binding my life to the most dangerous woman in the universe. My name is Dr. Elias Wren, 35 years old, exiled medic, permanent night shifts at the worst outpost in the galaxy. And this story doesn't start with me. It starts with her. The blade came from behind. Empress Kaelira was 26 years old. She had sat on the obsidian throne for 20 years. She had crushed rebellions before her body finished growing. She had silenced star systems before she learned to grieve. And tonight, on the war deck of her flagship Obsidian Dawn, someone slipped a knife between the plates of her armor. It wasn't meant to kill her. It was meant to break her. The blade slid into the seam at her shoulder. Surgical. Precise. The kind of strike you only learn from blueprints, from training manuals, from years of studying a body and knowing exactly where it bends. Kaelira didn't scream. Because Zentari empresses don't scream. Because she had been taught at 6 years old that pain was a private thing. That weakness was an invitation. That if you bled alone. She turned. Caught nothing. The shadow was already gone. Slipping back through a service hatch that should have been sealed 3 hours ago. Which meant someone with access had unsealed it. Which meant someone she trusted wanted her alive. But broken. She pressed her clawed hand against the navigation console. The metal groaned under her grip. Around her, the red alarm lights began their slow, rhythmic pulse, painting her black armor in the color of arteries. Her shoulder hung wrong, dislocated, not severed, cracked along the seam but still functional. Whoever did this knew exactly how much damage to leave her with, wanted her hurting, wanted her vulnerable, wanted her to choose where to bleed. The door burst open. Commander Vorik arrived with 6 guards. His pulse rifle was already up. His face was carved from the same stone the Empress was built from. 8 feet of armored fury. Eyes the color of cold iron. Empress. His voice cut through the alarms. Single assailant, she said. Trained. Familiar. He moved through the port hatch. That hatch was sealed. It wasn't. A pause. Vorik understood the pause. Imperial Medical Bay is 12 seconds away. No. The word landed like a verdict, because the Imperial Medical Bay reported to the Council. And the Council reported to Mathar. and Mathar. Mathar was one of 4 people on this ship with Level 1 clearance. There were only 4. Herself, Vorik, General Sarkhan, and Elder Mathar, the man who had raised her since she was 6 years old, the man who had dried her tears at her mother's funeral and then taught her never to cry again. One of them had unsealed that hatch. One of them had wanted her like this. "Find me somewhere else," she said. "Somewhere off-grid, somewhere unimportant, somewhere no one would look." Vorik hesitated. In 20 years, she had never refused Imperial protocol. "Empress, the medical bay is compromised. Protocol is compromised. The ship is compromised." Her tri-slit eyes burned violet so dark they looked like wet ink. "Find me a hole in the wall. Now." He bowed. He found her Helix 9. 3,000 light-years away, in a forgotten corner of the Kepler fringe. A rust bucket of a refueling station bolted to an asteroid the color of old bone. That's where I lived. That's where they sent me when they couldn't decide whether to fire me, or kill me, or just forget I ever existed. I had taken option 3 for myself. The lights buzzed. The coffee was burnt. The recycled air tasted like static. My boots were untied because I'd been on shift for 14 hours, and I'd stopped caring about bootlaces somewhere around hour 9. I had 3 patients that month: a docker with a sprained ankle, a pilot with mild gravity sickness, and a maintenance tech who got his hand caught in a ventilation grate and was too embarrassed to ask for help until his fingers turned purple. This was my life. This was the consequence of saving a child the Terran military told me to let die. 12 years ago, I was 23. Fresh out of medical residency. Stationed on a border outpost during a brief, ugly conflict with the Zentari frontier. A little girl had been pulled from the wreckage of a civilian transport. 4 years old, orphaned, bleeding from a punctured secondary lung. The admiral on duty looked at her chart and said, "Not covered. Let her go." I didn't let her go. I operated for 9 hours. Used supplies I wasn't authorized to use. Adapted Terran techniques to Zentari anatomy, with nothing but a hand-drawn diagram and a stubborn refusal to lose another patient. She lived. I lost my career. Her name was Saila. She would be 16 now. I still wrote to her. Every month, from an outpost on the edge of nowhere. Because some choices you make once, and then you keep making them. For the rest of your life. The airlock hissed. I was halfway through a cup of coffee that had crossed the line from drinkable to philosophical. I looked up, and the doorway filled with black glass. 8 Zentari royal guards in full battle armor poured into my infirmary like spilled oil. They moved in tactical formation. They smelled like ozone and metal, and that copper tang stress hormone Zentari released when their adrenaline peaked. Their rifles came up, 8 barrels, aimed at my chest, my very small, very human, very unarmored chest. I set down my coffee. I sighed. And then the formation parted. She walked through like a queen walking through her own kingdom. 7 feet tall, black armor that drank the light, hair the color of midnight smoke, eyes that shifted color like a dying star. Violet, then deeper violet, then something that wasn't a color, so much as a warning. I recognized her instantly. Anyone with a holovet had seen her face. Empress Kaelira, the conqueror of the Crimson Nebula. The woman who had raised 2 rebellions before she turned 20. The reason 67 star systems went to bed with the lights on. She was 26 years old. She was the most feared sovereign in the known universe. And right now, she was favoring her left side so heavily, her entire torso had rotated to compensate. Her armor was cracked at the shoulder. Pale Zentari blood was drying in the seam. She was hurt, and under the fluorescent buzz of my outpost ceiling, she just looked tired. I looked at the 8 rifles pointed at my heart. I looked at the Empress on my bio bed. I looked at the cold coffee I would never finish. Usually, I said, I get a please or a thank you, not a firing squad. The guard stiffened. Arms down, I can't fix her if I'm dead. Silence. The Empress made a clicking sound in her throat, a frequency I felt in my molars rather than heard. The rifles lowered, slowly, reluctantly, like a tide that had been told to stop. I walked toward her, hands visible, movement slow, the way they teach you in residency when an alien dignitary lands on your table. Radiate calm. Project safety. Make them believe you are not going to hurt them, even though they could break you in half, even though they probably had broken many things in half, even though every cell in your body is screaming at you to run. But underneath the fear, underneath everything, I am a doctor, and she was hurting. Permission to touch your highness. She turned those eyes on me. I had read about Zentari biology. Their physiology was built around the idea that vulnerability was death, that to be injured in front of another being was to invite the killing blow. So when she let her gaze meet mine, when she nodded once, it was not a small thing. It was the surrender of something ancient. Do what you must, she rasped. Her voice was a blade wrapped in velvet. I stepped into her space, my hands, soft and unarmored, and ridiculous against the cool, hard plate of her shoulder. I felt the architecture of the dislocation through the Kitian. I felt the tremor that ran through her entire body when I made contact. Not fear. Something deeper. A biological reset. Like her cells had been waiting 20 years for a hand that wasn't holding a weapon. Deep breath in and out. She inhaled, a rattling sound from somewhere ancient inside her chest. On 3. 1, 2. I never wait for 3. You give a patient time to brace and the muscles lock, and the pop becomes a tear. I pushed. I twisted. The crack was sickening. Wet. Final. And then she fell forward. Just a little. Just enough that her forehead came to rest against my chest. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. The most powerful being in the galaxy, leaning against an exiled medic in a stained coat. It was an accident of gravity. It was the body surrendering before the mind could stop it, and I did what I have always done. My hand came up on its own. Because that's what hands do. When someone is hurting, the way any human hand does, without thinking, without asking. It landed on the back of her neck. My thumb brushed the softer scales there, the hidden ones, the fragile ones beneath the armored plate. the place she had probably never let anyone touch, and her entire body went still. "You're okay," I said softly. "You're okay. I've got you." From Kaelira's side of that moment, the universe ended. She had not been held since she was 6 years old. 20 years. 2 decades. 7,300 days. She had counted them. She had stopped counting. She had started counting again on lonely nights. Her mother had been the last. Empress Leora. Gold eyes, warm as morning. The lullaby in the nursery. The arm that had wrapped around a 6-year-old's shoulder the night before the coup. The next morning, Leora was dead. The next morning, Kaelira was on a throne with blood drying on the steps. The next morning, Elder Mathar had knelt before her and told her she must become something that cannot grieve. And she had. She had become the thing that burned worlds, the thing that held 67 systems in an iron grip because the alternative was chaos. The thing that had not been touched without tactical purpose in 20 years. Every hand that had reached for her wanted something. A treaty, a favor, a blade between her ribs. And then, this man, this unremarkable, exhausted, mildly irritating, coffee-smelling human, put his hand on the back of her neck and told her she was okay. The warmth of it hit her like a shock wave. Not the temperature, the intent. There was no agenda in those fingers, no calculation, no fear. He was touching her the way you touched something fragile, something precious. And she had not been treated as either of those things since she was too young to remember what either word felt like. Her eyes changed. She felt it happening and couldn't stop it. The violet drained, replaced by black. Solid. Deep. Absolute. A color her species only produced in moments of profound biological recognition. Her dual hearts locked into a rhythm they had never beaten before. Frantic. Syncopated. Reaching outside her own body, reaching for the lone heartbeat on the other side of her face, the single fragile drum of a species too soft to survive and too stubborn to stop trying. She pulled back, slowly, every cell in her body screaming at her to stay. She looked at his hand, the one that had touched her neck. She looked at her guards. They had gone still. Their weapons were at their sides. Their heads were bowed low. They knew. Every Zentari in that infirmary knew. They could smell the chemical change in her blood, the ancient cascade, the one that had not been triggered in the royal line for 300 years. The right of the shield kin. A bonding response buried so deep in Zentari neurobiology that the archives spoke of it as a myth. A relic, triggered only when a member of the royal bloodline was held in a moment of total vulnerability by someone who showed no fear, no revulsion, no desire for power. It had not been triggered in 3 centuries. Because no one had been foolish enough to comfort a Zentari Empress without wanting something in return. Until Elias Wren, who apparently just wanted to finish his coffee. He didn't know. He had no idea his hand had rewritten her cellular chemistry. He had no idea that the warmth spreading through her chest was not gratitude. It was something older, encoded at the genetic level. A bond that connected her life force to his. If the shieldkin died, the Empress would lose half her biological power. permanently. The strongest ruler in the galaxy had just acquired her greatest weakness, and he was standing there in a coffee-stained medical coat, looking at her like she was just another patient. "You kept me," she whispered. The words slipped out before she could cage them. The translator in his earpiece flickered, struggling with the Zentari root, cycling between kept, held, shielded, bound. "I just fixed your shoulder," he said, offering a lopsided, exhausted smile. Standard triage. Standard triage. He didn't know. He didn't know. She stood, 7 feet of apex predator wrapped in a thin thermal blanket that he had draped over her shoulders without asking. She wore it like a royal cape, because everything she wore became royal by proximity. She turned to Vorik. "Secure him." He blinked. "Wait, what?" "He is shield kin," she announced, and her voice rang in the infirmary like a bell forged from iron. "He has invoked the right. His life is now the Empire's life." The guards moved, but they did not raise their weapons at him. They turned outward, forming a circle, a living wall of armor and intent. He was no longer a prisoner. He was something far more complicated. And Kaelira watched him from across that little outpost, her black eyes burning, with an intensity that had nothing to do with anger, and everything to do with the terrifying realization that for the first time in 20 years, she had something to lose. The shuttle climbed away from Helix 9 in silence. Through the viewport, the asteroid shrank to a smear of rock against the black, then to a pinprick, then to nothing at all. I sat across from her, flanked by 2 guards who couldn't decide whether to worship me or dissect me. They kept glancing at me like I was an artifact, like I might explode. My entire life fit in the duffel bag at my feet. 3 changes of clothes, a battered medical kit, an obscene quantity of instant coffee packets. That was it. 35 years of existence, in a bag I could carry in one hand. The Empress sat across from me, her armor reflecting the cabin lights, her black eyes watching me the way a sculptor watches marble. I cleared my throat. "So, casual, calm, the voice you use at airport security. Does this come with a pay raise, or just more bodyguards?" The guard stiffened. No one talked to the Empress like that. No one. But something moved in her chest, a vibration, low and rhythmic, rising up her throat, the Zentari equivalent of a laugh. She killed it before it reached her mouth, but it had been there, for half a second. It had been there. "You will have quarters on the Imperial deck," she said, her voice flat, controlled. "You will have access to the medical facilities. You will have a security detail at all times." "What about my patients here? You had 3 patients this month. A docker with a sprained ankle, a pilot with gravity sickness, an incident involving a ventilation grate." She paused. "I read your file while you were packing. That's thorough. I am thorough about everything that belongs to me." The words landed in the space between us, like a stone in still water. I watched the ripples cross my own thoughts. Confusion, a flash of indignation, and then something softer. "I don't belong to you," I said quietly. Not challenging, just stating a fact. The way you state that gravity pulls down, or that stars burn out. She held my gaze for a long moment. No, she admitted, and the admission cost her something. I could see it. You do not, but I find that I am unwilling to let you go, and I do not yet understand why, which is a problem, because I am accustomed to understanding everything. The obsidian dawn swallowed us whole. The flagship was the size of a small city. It hung in the dark like a cathedral of black stone and bioluminescent veins, pulsing slowly, breathing, like the ship itself was alive. I looked at it through the viewport, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 12 years. I felt small. Small, the way you feel when you're standing on the edge of an ocean, or staring up at a mountain, or realizing your life is about to change in ways you cannot map. The docking clamps engaged, the ramp extended, and the air of the obsidian dawn flooded into the shuttle. Warm, filtered, humming with the deep vibration of a fusion reactor powerful enough to crack a planet's crust. Vorik stepped forward. His voice could have cut steel. Welcome to the Obsidian Dawn. Stay close to your escort. Do not touch anything. Do not speak to the crew. Do not. Don't worry, Commander. I shouldered my duffel bag. I'll try not to start any more ancient blood rituals. 1 per day is my limit. His jaw tightened. The Empress turned away before anyone could see the second vibration building in her throat. The corridors were built for Zentari proportions. 12-foot ceilings of polished black stone, veined with circuitry that pulsed in slow breathing patterns, as if the ship had a heartbeat all its own. I looked absurd walking through them, flanked by guards who towered over me by 2 feet. I looked like a man who had wandered into a cathedral built for gods, and was trying very hard to pretend he had meant to be there all along. Crew members stopped and stared. Word had already spread. Of course it had. On a ship this size, gossip moved faster than light. The Empress had returned from an unscheduled departure with a dislocated shoulder and a human. A shieldkin. The first in 300 years. I could feel the whispers like static, crackling through every deck we passed. By morning, the entire Dominion would know. But that was morning's problem. She assigned me quarters 3 doors from her own. 3 doors. The whole ship. 60 levels. 5,000 cabins. 3 doors. The space was vast. Vaulted ceilings. A bed that could have slept 4. A window that looked out at the slow rotation of the Kepler Nebula. Amber and violet bleeding across the glass. I stood in the middle of the room. I dropped my duffel bag. It hit the polished floor with a small, sad thud. I laughed. A short, manic, bewildered laugh. The kind of laugh that escapes a man who has woken up inside someone else's life and cannot remember which door he came in through. I sat on the edge of the bed. I sat there for a long time. 3 doors away. Kaelira pressed her hand against the wall. If she focused. If she let the bond settle into the space behind her sternum. She could feel the faint thrum of his heartbeat. Through 12 inches of reinforced stone, a single drum. Lonely, brave, slightly off tempo. She pulled her hand back. Her claws had left 5 shallow grooves in the wall. That was irrational. That was sentimental. That was beneath an Empress. She put her hand back. I couldn't sleep. The bed was too big. The room was too quiet. The whole flagship hummed at a frequency that was just barely too low to ignore. I got up. I pulled on a fresh shirt. I tied my boots. I opened the door. The guard outside snapped to attention. "Sir, I just want to walk. Sir, protocol requires. I am going to walk. You can come with me, or you cannot come with me, but I am going to walk." The guard hesitated. Then he fell into step 3 paces behind me. I walked. I had no destination. I walked. The corridors blurred. Black stone. Pulsing veins. Tall doors. The slow breath of the ship. After 20 minutes, I turned a corner, and I found her. She was on her hands and knees, a small Zentari woman. Old by their standards, which meant somewhere over 200 years. Her scales had faded to a soft gunmetal gray. Her tail wrapped neatly around her hip as she scrubbed a spot on the floor. She was using a cloth that looked like a rag, in a hallway built for queens. She looked up when I stopped. Her eyes were the color of warm amber. "You are him," she said. Her voice was reedy and dry, but it had a music to it, like a flute that had been left out in the rain and learned to like the sound. "I'm sorry. The shieldkin. The human." "Oh." I rubbed the back of my neck. "Yeah. I guess I am." She studied me for a long moment. Then she went back to scrubbing. I watched her for a few seconds. Then I knelt down beside her. The guard behind me made a strangled sound. I ignored him. "What are we cleaning?" "Coolant leak. The day crew missed it. It will eat through the floor by morning if no one scrubs." "Got another rag." She blinked. She produced a second cloth from her apron. I took it. I started scrubbing. We worked in silence for a while. She was faster than me. Older, but precise. Like she had been doing this for so long, the motion was part of her bones. "What's your name?" I asked. "Veska. Elias." "I know." "Right." She made a small clicking sound in her throat, different from the Empress's clicks. Softer. Almost. Amused. "You are smaller than I expected," she said. "Most people are, compared to your Empress." "Most people are, compared to anyone on this ship." I laughed. She looked at me sideways, her amber eyes catching the corridor light. "You make her laugh," she said. "Sorry." "The Empress. Earlier. In the shuttle. You made her laugh. She thinks no one noticed, but the whole ship noticed." "I didn't." "You did." I sat back on my heels. "How long have you been on this ship, Veska?" 41 years. I came aboard the Obsidian Dawn the year it was commissioned. I have served the throne under 3 empresses. 3 Empress Vela, Empress Leora. A pause. And now Empress Kaelira. Lyora. The name didn't mean anything to me yet, but something in the way Veska said it. Soft. Reverent. Carrying the weight of an old grief. I stopped scrubbing. "Tell me about Leora," I said. Veska's hand stilled. She looked at me for a long, long moment. Then she sat back, folded her hands in her lap, looked down at the floor. "Empress Leora was Kaelira's mother." "I know that part. You know what the histories tell you." The histories tell you that Empress Leora died in a coup 20 years ago. The histories tell you that loyalists put her killers to the sword. The histories tell you that her 6-year-old daughter took the throne in a ceremony of unity. That's not what happened. Vesca met my eyes. Leora was the kindest soul I have ever known. She said it quietly, but the words filled the corridor like a hymn. She walked these halls and learned every cleaner's name, every cook's name. Every soldier's name. She believed the throne should belong to its people, not the other way around. She was working on reforms. Quiet ones. Slow ones. She was going to share power with the council. Voluntarily. She was going to teach her daughter that gentleness was not a weakness. Vesca's hands tightened in her lap, and then she was gone. And the next day, Elder Mathar took that little girl and made her into something she was never meant to be. Something cold moved through me. You think she was murdered? I do not think. Then what do you? I think she wrote down what she feared. I went still. What? Leora kept a journal. She wrote in it every night. She read parts of it to me sometimes. When I was scrubbing the corridor outside her chambers, she told me, if anything ever happens to me, the book is in the old library. Where is it now? Where I left it. In the old library. On the lower decks. No one goes there anymore. The new library is on deck 5. The old one is just forgotten. Vesca looked up at me, her amber eyes glassy and clear. I never opened it. It was not for me. It was for her daughter. If her daughter ever became someone who could read it. Why are you telling me this? Because tonight. She reached out a clawed hand, patted my arm. Once. Gently. Tonight she let a stranger touch her neck, and she did not pull away. So I think. Maybe. The book has waited long enough. I walked back to my quarters. I did not remember the walk. The guard followed me. Silent. I lay on the enormous bed, staring up at the vaulted ceiling, the slow pulse of the bioluminescent veins, thinking about a woman I had never met, a mother who had been murdered for being kind, a 6-year-old girl who had been taught to stop crying, a 26-year-old Empress who had let me put my hand on the back of her neck. I closed my eyes. I did not sleep. 3 doors away, Kaelira sat at her data terminal. It was 3 a.m. ship time. The corridors had dimmed to their deep blue night cycle. Her chambers were dark except for the faint glow of the screen. She had pulled the access logs, every door seal, every command override, every signal relay from the 6 hours before the attack. The pattern emerged slowly. The port hatch had been unsealed remotely. The guard rotation had been altered at the source. Her emergency medical beacon had been rerouted. To nowhere. She would have bled out in the dark between stars, far from any facility that could save her. The only reason she had not was that Vorek had manually overridden navigation, found Helix 9, found Elias Wren, found a coffee-stained miracle who put his hand on the back of her neck and told her she was okay. The rerouting command had been issued from a terminal with Level 1 clearance. There were only 4 people on the Obsidian Dawn with Level 1 clearance. Herself, Vorek, General Sarkhan, and Elder Mathar, the man who had raised her, the man who had knelt before her blood-soaked throne 20 years ago and taught her how to stop grieving. She pressed her palm to her own neck, right at the spot. The spot. The warmth was still there. Phantom. Persistent. Impossible. She closed her eyes. She tried to remember what her mother's face had looked like. She could not. Not the whole face. Just fragments. The curve of an eye ridge. The shape of a smile. The gold of those eyes. The hum of a lullaby in a dark nursery. 20 years of fortress walls. And tonight, a human hand had found the one crack in the foundation. The hairline fracture she had spent 2 decades trying to seal. One single tear escaped her left eye. Tracked down her cheek. Hit the surface of the data terminal. It made a small, soft sound. A sound she had not heard in 20 years. She wiped it away. She did not wipe it away angrily. She wiped it away the way you wipe away something precious. Something you didn't realize you still had. In the medical bay on Deck 6, a young Zentari soldier named Corvin lay unconscious on a biobed. His chest was open. His cardiac plate was shattered. The Imperial physicians had declared the damage irreparable. He was Commander Vorek's younger brother. He was 22 years old. He had 3 days to live, maybe 4. The physicians had moved him to palliative care. In Zentari tradition, this meant he would be allowed to die with dignity. His family would be summoned. Vorek would stand by the bed and watch his only brother slip away. And the war would continue. And the throne would continue. And the universe would continue. That was the way of things. That had always been the way of things. But there was a human on board now. And the human did not yet know about Corvin. And the universe. The universe was about to learn what happens when you give a soft species too much stubbornness and a slightly better caffeine intake. The ship's artificial dawn began at 0600. The bioluminescent veins shifted from deep indigo to a pale clinical gold. The obsidian dawn woke up, and with it, the politics. I rolled onto my back, stared at the ceiling, wondered what I was supposed to wear to meet an elder council. The door chimed. A guard. A new one. Younger. His voice was crisp. Dr. Wren, the Empress requests your presence in the throne room. The Elder Council has convened. At 6 in the morning. At 6 in the morning, sir. They couldn't wait until I had coffee. A pause. There will be coffee at the throne room, sir. Will there? No, sir. I lied. A small smile twitched at the corner of his mouth, just for a second, just long enough that I noticed. Then it was gone. He was a soldier again. Stone. I sighed. Give me 10 minutes. The throne room was a cathedral, a cavern of polished obsidian, banners that depicted 6 centuries of conquest, pillars carved from volcanic glass. The throne itself, a single piece of black stone carved by hand, designed to be uncomfortable, designed to remind the ruler that power was never rest. Kaelira sat in it. She wore her formal armor, the kind with the high collar, the kind that hid the soft scales on her neck, the kind that made her look like a fortress had grown a face. I walked in flanked by 2 guards. I had on the same scrubs I had worn the night before. My coffee mug was in my hand, half full of something dark and bitter that someone had produced from a service kitchen and called coffee in the loosest possible sense. 7 elders stood in a semicircle. Their scales had faded to the dull gray of long life. Their eyes were every shade of bronze. Their hands were folded behind their backs. And at their head, Elder Mathar, the oldest living Zentari in the Dominion. His face was a topographic map of survival. His eyes were the color of tarnished bronze. He had served 3 empresses. He had buried 2. He had raised the woman on the throne. He looked at me, and I felt it. Not hatred. Not yet. Calculation. He was looking at me the way an accountant looks at an unexpected line item, the way a watchmaker looks at a gear he did not install, the way a man looks at a problem he has not yet decided how to solve. He bowed. The precise depth prescribed by protocol. Not a millimeter more. Not a millimeter less. Empress. His voice was dry parchment over grinding stone. The council requests an audience regarding the matter of the Shieldkin. Kaelira's eyes flicked to me, just for a second. Black. They had not turned back to violet since the outpost. I wondered if she had noticed. I wondered if she ever would. She looked back at Mathar. The council is granted its audience. Speak. He straightened. Behind him, the other elders shifted, aligning, forming a wall of bronze and copper eyes, fixed on their Empress. The right of the Shieldkin has not been invoked in 312 years, Mathar began. The last instance ended in catastrophe. The bonded human died within a season. Empress Vela lost half her biological strength. The succession wars nearly tore the Dominion apart. He paused, letting the history settle. Like ash over the throne room. We do not question the biological reality of the bond. We question the wisdom of allowing it to persist. With a Terran, a species with a lifespan of 80 years, a species with no armor, no venom, no natural weapons of any kind. I drank my coffee. It was terrible. I drank it again. The council proposes 2 paths, Mathar said. First, the bond may be annulled. Through the rite of severance, the Empress would lose approximately 15% of her biological capacity. Permanently. But the vulnerability would be eliminated. Second, he folded his clawed hands behind his back. If the Empress insists on maintaining the bond, the human must prove his worth through the 3 trials of ascension. If he fails, the bond is severed by law, and the human is returned to Terran space. I waited. I waited for the rest of it. There was always a rest of it. And if he succeeds? Kaelira asked. Mathar's expression did not change. No non-Zentari has ever succeeded. Silence. A long, deep throne room silence. The kind of silence that exists only in places that were built to hold it. I looked at Kaelira. She looked at me. She did not look long, but long enough. The trials, she said. Something moved behind Mathar's eyes. A flicker. So brief I almost missed it. Surprise, or something colder. As the Empress commands, he said. He bowed again. And I just stood there, in my coffee-stained scrubs, holding a mug of liquid mistake, and realizing that I had just been signed up for 3 ancient blood rituals before breakfast. I took another sip. The coffee did not get any better, but I drank it anyway. Because some part of me, some quiet, stubborn, exiled part of me, recognized something in the woman on that obsidian throne. She had been holding a coffee that did not get better for 20 years, and she had drunk it anyway, because someone had told her she was not allowed to set it down. Until last night, until a hand on the back of her neck had told her she was okay. So fine. 3 trials. I had survived medical school. I had survived being exiled. I had survived 12 years of cold coffee. How bad could 3 Zentari blood trials really be? I would find out. I would find out very soon. But first I had a library to find, and a journal to read, and a mother's voice to hear, for a daughter who had been waiting 20 years to be told that she was okay. The first trial was called Blood. Of course it was. I stood in the center of an arena built to hold 300 Zentari. The seats rose in tiered circles of black stone above me. Every single one of them was full. Every single one. Officers had shuttled in from escort ships just to watch. A human, attempting the trials of ascension. The Dominion had not had entertainment this good in a generation. I was the entertainment. Lucky me. The arena floor was a perfect circle of obsidian, cold under my boots. The lights overhead were harsh and white and clinical. They made everyone look like a corpse on an autopsy table. I appreciated the honesty. Above me, on an elevated stone seat that wasn't quite a throne, but wasn't quite not a throne, Kyalira sat. Her face was a mask, imperial indifference, carved in stone. The kind of face that has watched men die and not blinked, but underneath, I could feel her. The bond hummed between us like a plucked wire, steady, tight, pulled taut by what was about to happen. Her heartbeats were a frantic, syncopated drumline in my chest. Faster than mine, louder than mine. She was terrified. And the woman who had been carved to feel nothing was feeling everything. The trial master approached. His name was Vash, an elder. He had been conducting these trials for 90 years. He carried a ceremonial blade, the kind of blade that exists for one purpose: to open skin. The blade was coated, milky white venom, slow-acting, designed to enter the bloodstream and be metabolized by the Zentari secondary liver. Humans do not have a secondary liver. This was not an oversight. This was the point. Vash stopped in front of me. He was 8 feet tall. He looked down at me the way you look at a small dog that has wandered into a wolf council. "Dr. Wren, do you accept the trial of blood?" The arena went silent. I cleared my throat. "Quick question." A long pause. "You may ask. What's the molecular structure of the venom protein-based or alkaloid?" Vash blinked. In 90 years of trials, no one had ever asked a question. "Protein-based. Enzymatic degradation pathway. Hepatic. Through the secondary liver." "Right. Yeah, I don't have one of those." The arena began to murmur. "But I have something you don't." I reached into the pocket of my scrubs. I pulled out a small vial. Clear liquid. Faint blue tint. I had spent the entire night synthesizing it. In the medical bay, working through the ship's pharmaceutical database. Adapting Terran emergency room compounds to my own biology. Calibrating for the venom's molecular weight. Calculating for body mass. Sleep deprivation. The accumulated effects of 2 days inside a body that had been steadily forgetting how to function under stress. I uncapped the vial. I drank it. Vaash stared. The entire arena stared. Above me, Kaelira's hand tightened on the armrest. The volcanic glass groaned. Epinephrine analog compound, I said, accelerates human hepatic processing by 300% for approximately 90 seconds. You drank it. I drank it before we began. That's traditionally how you take medication. Yes, this is not standard procedure. Welcome to field medicine, Elder. We make it up as we go. Vash looked up at the Empress. Kaelira's face did not change, but her voice carried across the arena like a verdict. Proceed. The blade cut. I felt the venom enter the bloodstream. For about 4 seconds, I felt fine. And then my body remembered I was a soft species with 1 liver and approximately 30 seconds of bad decisions left in it. My knees buckled. I caught myself on the obsidian floor. My palms hit the cold stone. The room tilted. The light swam. A roaring filled my ears, like an ocean, like a freight train, like the inside of a furnace. My jaw locked. A vein in my temple pulsed visibly. I could feel my body fighting. Every cell screaming. The compound I had taken was doing its job. Accelerating. Burning through the venom faster than my biology was designed to allow. It hurt. It hurt the way you imagine fire hurts before fire actually finds you. Above me. Through the bond. I felt Kaelira's hand close around her own throat. I felt her stand up, just slightly. I felt her sit back down, through sheer force of will. The whole arena had gone silent, the kind of silent that exists when 300 predators are watching small prey decide whether to die. The color began to return to my face. My breathing deepened. The trembling slowed, stopped. And then I stood up. I wiped the blood from my forearm with the hem of my scrub top. I looked up at the stunned arena, at Vash's wide eyes, at Kaelira's white-knuckled grip on her armrest. I tilted my head. Next. The arena exploded. Not into applause. Zentari do not applaud. Into a low collective rumble that vibrated through the stone. A sound that started in the chest, rolled up through the throat, released as something between a growl and a benediction. The sound a predator makes when it realizes the small thing it has been watching is not prey after all. Kaelira watched me walk out. She did not let her face change, but beneath the throne, hidden from every eye in the arena, her hand was trembling. I felt it through the bond. I felt the tremor, the relief, the terror, all of it crashing into her at once. She had nearly stood up, in front of 300 witnesses, to save me, to carry me, to do something, anything. The Empress of 67 star systems had nearly abandoned her composure, her dignity, her empire, for an exiled medic in stained scrubs. That was the moment she understood. The bond wasn't just biology. It was something else. Something the archives did not have a word for. Because the Zentari who had written the archives had never allowed themselves to feel it. I made it to the medical bay before I let my hands shake. I sat on a surgical stool. I put my head between my knees. I waited for the world to stop trying to spin in a direction my body did not approve of. 3 Zentari medics stood in a half circle around me, watching, not breathing. "I'm fine," I said. "I'm fine." I was not fine, but I was not dying. In my line of work, the space between fine and not dying is a perfectly acceptable place to live. I drank water. I ate a ration bar. I asked one of the medics for coffee. She brought me coffee. It was the first real coffee I had been given since coming aboard. Someone had pulled actual beans from somewhere. Someone had ground them, brewed them. The mug was warm in my hands. The steam smelled like home. I looked at her. "Did Commander Vorik send this?" She blinked. "I cannot confirm or deny that, Doctor." "Tell him thank you. I cannot relay messages from—" "Tell him anyway." She bowed. She left. I drank the coffee. It was wonderful. I should have rested. I should have gone to my quarters and slept for 12 hours and let my body recover from the small chemical war it had just lost. But there was a young man on a biobed 3 rooms over. His name was Corvin. He was 22 years old. He had 3 days to live. And he was Commander Vorik's brother. I knew this, because Veska had told me. While I had been scrubbing the corridor, she had said, in that reedy, soft voice, "There is a soldier on deck 6. He is dying. They have stopped fighting for him," she had said. "He has a brother who has not slept in a week." And then she had looked at me, with those amber eyes, the same way she had looked at me when she had told me about Leora. I had recognized the look. It was the look of a person who has been carrying a small piece of grief for too long, and has finally found someone willing to carry it with her. So I drank the coffee. I put down the mug. I stood up, and I walked to Corvin's room. The Zentari physicians had cleared the space. In Zentari medicine, a patient given palliative care is not abandoned. He is curated. The room is dimmed. The monitors are silenced. The family is summoned. The body is allowed to fail with dignity. The room felt like a cathedral nave, small, quiet, sacred. Corvin lay on the biobed. He was Vorik's brother, but he did not look like him. His scales were younger, brighter, almost iridescent. He had the lean build of a bridge officer who spent too many hours at a console. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. There was a thin line of pale blue fluid trickling from the corner of his mouth. His chest was open. The chitin plate over his heart had shattered in a training accident. 3 days ago, the shrapnel had nicked the secondary chamber. The bleeding was internal. The Zentari technique for reconstructing chitin armor required the body to be stable for 48 hours. Corvin's body had not been stable for 48 minutes. He was dying because his armor was broken, and no one could think of him as anything other than his armor. I stood there for a long moment, looking at the wound, looking at the way his body had tried to compensate, the way the secondary chamber was pumping too hard, the way the muscle wall around it was already stretching thin. "What are you doing in here?" I turned. Vorik. He filled the doorway. Full combat armor, his face raw with exhaustion, the kind of exhaustion that comes from sitting beside a bed for 3 days and refusing to leave. His eyes were not the eyes of a commander. They were the eyes of a brother, I came to look at him. You are not authorized. You were never going to authorize this, Commander. The Empress is not going to authorize this. The Council is not going to authorize this. So I came to look. He is not your patient. Everyone is my patient. That's sort of the deal I made. What deal? With myself, a long time ago. Vorik stared at me for a long moment. His jaw was locked. His clawed hand was on the doorframe, and the doorframe was groaning under his grip. Imperial physicians have declared him beyond help. Imperial physicians are trying to fix his armor. That is how Zentari medicine works. That's why he's dying. Silence. A long, heavy, 12-second silence. I said, quietly. What if we didn't try to fix the armor? Vorik blinked. What? The armor isn't the organ. It's a housing. If I can build a synthetic scaffold around the cardiac chamber, bypass the shattered plate, redirect the regenerative pathways, he doesn't need new armor. He needs structural support, just enough to hold the chamber in place until his body has time to heal. That is not possible. It's basic structural engineering. Honestly, I don't know why nobody thought of it before. Because he is Zentari, he is a body with a wound. The rest is cultural. Vorik did not speak. He did not move. He just stood there, in the doorway, for what felt like a very long time. Then he said, "If you do this, and he dies, he's going to die anyway, Commander. If he dies on your table." His voice cracked. The granite cracked, for just a second. The commander was not there. The brother was. I looked at him. He will not die on my table. You cannot promise that. No. Then why? Because if I don't try, he will definitely die. And I do not know how to walk away from a person who is hurting and pretend I did not see them. I worked for 6 hours. The Zentari medics assisted. They did not believe in what I was doing, but they did not stop me. Vorik had given the order, and in the absence of Imperial protocol, the brothers' order held. I adapted instruments. I built the scaffold from synthetic material the ship's fabricator produced in 20-minute increments. I directed 2 assistants on cell suturing techniques no Zentari medic had ever performed. The first 3 hours were the worst. My hands shook from the venom my body was still metabolizing. I had to stop twice. Drink water. Eat something. Sit down for 90 seconds. The medics watched me. They did not say anything, but they brought me water without being asked. They held the instrument steady when my grip faltered. They positioned themselves to catch me if I fell. I did not fall. At hour 4, Corvin's heart monitor stabilized. At hour 5, it strengthened. At hour 6, he opened his eyes. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at the lights. He looked at me. With confusion. With slow gathering awareness. His mouth moved. A single word in Zentari. The translator in my ear flickered. Vorik. His brother was there in 3 strides. Commander Vorik of the Imperial Guard. Decorated, feared, carved from the same granite as the Empress herself, knelt by the biobed of his younger brother, and placed his clawed hand against Corvin's cheek, and lowered his head. I saw his shoulders shake. Once, twice, And then, for the first time in his life, in front of 3 medics and 1 exiled human. Commander Vorek wept. I turned away. I did not need to see that. That moment was not mine. It was theirs. I left the medical bay. I walked. The way I had walked the night before, without a destination. Without a guard this time, because the guard had been called away by the developing situation that was 3 Zentari medics trying to figure out what to tell the Empress. I ended up at the observation deck. I had never been there before, but the corridor went that way, and the doors were open, and I walked through them. And I stopped, because I had never seen anything that beautiful. The Kepler Nebula filled the entire forward viewport, veils of amber and violet, vast enough to swallow worlds, a nursery of stars, the kind of view that exists in textbooks and not in real life. Except this one was real, and it was rotating slowly, the way ancient things rotate, as if it had nowhere to be. I sat on the low bench beneath the viewport. I put my head in my hands. I did not cry. But I came very close. I did not hear her come in. I felt her. The bond shifted, tightened, warmed. I looked up. Kaelira stood in the doorway. She was not in her formal armor. She wore something softer. A tunic of dark Zentari silk. The shoulder plates were gone. The high collar was gone. For the first time, I could see the softer scales along her arms, her collarbone, the delicate ones that lived beneath the heavy plate. She looked smaller. She looked like a person. Not an empress. A person. Come, she said quietly. Sit. I am sitting. I meant, closer. I moved. She crossed the room. She sat beside me. Not touching. 2 feet of space between us. Her shoulder at the level of my eye line. The nebula light catching on her scales like wet glass. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The ship hummed beneath us. The reactor pulsed. The nebula turned. You saved him. He's not out of the woods. He's going to need months of rehabilitation. He'll need a synthetic scaffold around his heart for the rest of his life. He'll be different. He will be alive. Yes, that is different. I looked at her. She was looking at the nebula, but her hand, her clawed, dark, dangerous hand, was resting on the bench between us, inches from mine. I did not move my hand. I did not move it closer. I did not move it away. I just left it where it was, soft and pale and unamoured and ridiculous, and let the bond hum between us, like a wire stretched between 2 distant cities. Why did you do it? She asked. Why did I save Corvin? Yes. Because he was dying, and I could stop it. That is not an answer. It's the only answer I have. A long pause. The nebula turned. She said, very quietly, I have spent my life believing that everyone who reaches for another being is reaching for something. A treaty, a favor, a debt. I have not been able to imagine, until this week, that a hand could simply reach, because the reaching is its own reason. I let that sit. I let it settle into the room. Then I said, Can I tell you something? You may tell me anything, I had a sister. I had not said her name aloud in 18 years. I had not said her name aloud since the day my father did what my father did. And I had decided that I would carry the silence so the silence would not consume anyone else. But sitting under that nebula, beside a woman who had never been told it was okay to grieve, I felt the words climb up out of my chest, the way the warmth had climbed out of my hand. The night I had touched the back of her neck, it just came. Her name was Marin. She was 12 years old. I was 17. The nebula rotated slowly, indifferent, patient. She had a fever, the kind of fever that should have meant something, the kind of fever that a tired doctor could mistake for an ordinary virus. She had been sick for 3 days. We had taken her to 2 clinics. Both of them said it was viral. Wait it out. Push fluids. Standard advice. My father was a physician. He was a good one. He had been good for 20 years. But that week he had been on call for 36 hours. He came home, and he was so tired he could barely take off his coat. And my mother said, "Look at her. Look at our daughter. Tell me she's getting better." And he looked at her, and he was tired, and he said, "She's fine. She's getting better. We'll take her in tomorrow if the fever isn't down." It was meningitis. She died at 2 in the morning. I was crying. I had not realized I was crying. A tear hit the back of my hand, and I noticed it. The way you notice rain when you have been walking outside and forgot you were outside. Kaelira did not move. She did not reach for me. She did not say, "I am sorry." She just sat, very still. The way you sit when a wild bird lands on your hand. The way you sit when something you cannot afford to startle has come to rest beside you. My father never forgave himself. He was a good doctor. He was a good father. He had been a good husband, and he had missed one diagnosis. In the middle of a 36-hour shift, he missed it, and his daughter died, and he spent 3 years trying to live with that. And then he didn't. He didn't what? He didn't live with it anymore. I felt her go still. I felt the question land. I did not look at her. I came home from college, my 2nd year, spring break. The house was quiet. The lights were off. I found a note from my mother. I found a note from me. The note said, "I am tired. I have been tired for a long time. I should have looked at her longer. I will be looking for her now." I waited in the kitchen for 2 hours. And then I decided. I decided that I would not be a person who walked past someone in pain, because the cost of walking past was a sister dead at 12, and a father dead at 53, and a mother who never came back into a kitchen without checking the doorway first. Silence. The nebula rotated. The reactor hummed. The ship lived. After a long, long time, Kaelira spoke. 20 years ago, I lost my mother. I know. You know. Veska told me a little. Veska, a small, soft vibration in her throat. Almost a laugh. Almost. Veska has been on this ship since before I was born. She remembers everyone. She told you about my mother. She told me your mother was kind. Kaelira closed her eyes. When she opened them, the black had softened, just slightly. There was something at the edges, a faint pulse of something I did not yet have a word for. My mother was kind, she said. She was the only kind thing in my life. the night before she died. She held me. In the nursery. She sang to me. I remember the song. I remember the gold of her eyes. I remember the warmth of her arm. The next morning she was dead, and Elder Mathar told me grief was a luxury for the conquered, that I had to become something that could not grieve. And I did. I became it. I have been it. For 20 years, I have walked past a galaxy full of people in pain, because someone told me that was the only way to hold the throne. She turned to look at me. Her eyes were not violet. They were not black. For just a second, in the nebula light, they almost looked blue. I have been wrong, she said. I did not know what to say to that. I am usually decent at words. I write monthly letters to a 16-year-old girl on a frontier moon. I have given 13 eulogies. I have told 92 families that their loved one did not make it. But I did not have words for what she had just said. So I did the thing my hands always do. I moved my hand across the 2 feet of space between us, across the inches, and I covered her clawed hand with mine. Her hand was cool, hard, dark, ridged, dangerous. My hand was warm, soft, pale, small, fragile. The contrast was absurd. I did not care. She did not move her hand away. We sat like that, under the nebula, for a long, long time, until the lights of the ship began their slow shift from night to morning, and neither of us had said another word, and neither of us needed to. The next morning was the trial of mind. I sat in a simulation pod for 6 hours. A war scenario. A battle for a contested mining colony. 40,000 simulated lives. 2 opposing fleets. Limited resources. Imperfect intel. The Zentari approach to war is simple. Find the enemy. Destroy the enemy. Take what is left. I did not do that. I sent emissaries to the rebel commander. I offered concessions. I traded mineral rights for hostage release. I funneled humanitarian supplies through a back channel that the Council later told me did not technically exist in Zentari military doctrine. I lost half the contested resources. I lost 2 destroyers. I saved 81% of the simulated lives. The Zentari approach would have saved 43%. The Council reviewed the results. There was a long silence. Elder Vash, the trial master, the same one who had cut my arm 2 days ago, spoke first. You did not win the engagement. No. You surrendered tactical positions. Yes. You traded mineral rights for human lives. Yes. This is not the standard Zentari approach. I am not Zentari. Silence. Elder Mathar stepped forward. You may not be Zentari, but you wear the Shieldkin bond. You are bound to the Empress of the Zentari Dominion. Your actions reflect on her. Do you understand what you have done? I have ended a simulated war with 81% of the population still alive. You have shown weakness. I have shown a choice. That is not how the Empire holds power. Then maybe, I let the sentence hang, maybe the Empire should consider holding power differently. Mathar's eyes narrowed, his tarnished bronze sharpening into something colder, and in that moment, For just 1 second, I saw him. Not the elder, not the advisor. The man. The man who had spent 20 years building an empire around a 6-year-old girl. The man who had told that little girl her grief was a luxury. The man who was watching everything he had carefully constructed begin to slip. I held his gaze. I did not look away. "The trial is concluded," Vash said. "While I was in the simulation pod, Kaelira was in the old library. The old library was on deck 19, a forgotten corridor. Dust on the lights, a door that had not been opened in 20 years. She went alone. She told her guards she needed privacy. She told Vorik she would be back in 2 hours. She told no one where she was going. The door creaked when she opened it. The smell of old paper and slow time and forgotten things. The library had been her mother's place. She remembered it now. In flashes. The way you remember a dream you had as a child. A reading nook by a tall window. A blanket on the floor. The hum of a voice reading to her. The shape of her mother's profile in the lamplight. She walked through the shelves. Her claws traced the spines of books no one had opened in 2 decades. She found it on the 3rd shelf in the 3rd row. A small leather-bound journal. Plain. Unmarked. Tucked between 2 ceremonial histories where no one would think to look for it. She lifted it out. She held it for a long moment. She did not open it. She walked to the reading nook. She sat down. She set the journal on her lap. And she sat there. For a long time. With her mother's words. Closed. In her hands. Then she opened it. The handwriting was familiar. She had not seen it in 20 years. But the body remembers what the mind forgets. The shape of her mother's letters. The slope of the line. The little curl at the end of certain words. Tears began to fall before she had finished the first page. She wiped them away. She kept reading. Most of the entries were small, daily things. A note about a cook who had hurt his hand. A note about a guard who had a new baby. A note about Kaelira herself. "My daughter is 6 today. She asked me what stars taste like. I told her they taste like courage. She read for an hour. She read until she found the entry from 3 days before Leora died. Mathar came to see me today. He is afraid. He believes the reforms will weaken the throne. He believes the council needs to seize power, not be given it. He says power given can be taken back. I told him. Power given is the only kind that lasts. He did not agree. He was very, very still. When he left, I think I am afraid of him. I have never been afraid of him before. If something happens to me, tell my daughter, that love is not a weakness. It is the only strength that survives anything. Tell her. Tell her. Tell her I am still with her." Kaelira closed the journal. She held it against her chest. She wept. She wept the way a person weeps when they have been holding their breath for 20 years. The way you weep when something inside you breaks and the breaking turns out to be a release. The way a body weeps when it has finally been told, by a voice it had given up on hearing, that it is allowed to grieve. She cried for her mother. She cried for the 6-year-old girl in the throne room. She cried for the 26-year-old woman who had walked past a galaxy of pain because someone had told her that was strength. She cried until she could not cry anymore. And then she stood up. She straightened her tunic. She tucked the journal under her arm. She wiped her face with the back of her clawed hand. And she walked. She walked through the old library. She walked through Deck 19. She walked through the long corridor that connected the lower decks to the council chambers. She walked up 4 flights of stairs. She walked through the double doors of Mathar's private office. She did not knock. Mathar looked up from his desk. His face did not change, but she saw it. In his eyes, for half a second, the recognition. He saw the journal in her hand. He saw the redness around her eyes. He saw the set of her jaw. He saw 20 years of careful construction crack down the middle. And he knew. He knew. He did not move. She closed the door behind her. She sealed it. She placed the journal on his desk. And she said, in a voice so quiet it could have been a whisper, in a voice so quiet it could have been a prayer, in a voice so quiet it shook every wall, "You killed her." Mathar did not answer. He looked at the journal. He looked at the Empress. He looked at his hands. And then, slowly, quietly, with the weariness of a man who had been carrying a stone for 20 years and was finally being allowed to set it down, he said, "Yes." The room was silent for a very long time. Kaelira did not strike him. She wanted to. Every cell in her body wanted to, but there was something warm in her chest, steady, patient, the single drum of a single human heart. 3 decks away, in a simulation pod, saving 40,000 simulated lives. That heartbeat held her in place. It told her there were other ways to be strong. "Why?" she said. Not a question, a demand. She was going to give the council power, voluntarily. She believed compassion was enough. She believed the people would honor a gift. She was right. She was naive. She was right. "Empress, do not call me that. Not now." Mathar closed his eyes. When he opened them, there was something in them she had not seen before. Sadness. "I made you," he said. "I made you so the Empire would survive her death. I made you into something feared, so the Council would have time to consolidate, so the Dominion would not fracture. I told myself it was for the Empire. I told myself the cost was acceptable. The cost was me. Yes. The cost was my childhood. Yes. The cost was 20 years. Yes." She stepped closer. Her shadow fell across the desk. "You will be confined to your quarters, under guard. I have not yet decided what to do with you. I will decide soon. Do not speak to me until I do." He bowed his head. He did not argue. She turned to leave. At the door, she paused. She did not turn around. "My mother loved you," she said. "I know. You broke her heart before you took her life. I know. I hope it cost you something. It cost me everything, Empress. It cost me everything." She walked out. She made it 14 steps down the corridor. Then her legs gave out. She caught herself against the wall. Her claws bit deep into the polished stone. Her dual hearts were pounding out of rhythm. The ozone scent of her own stress hormones thickened the air. 20 years. Every lesson, every doctrine, every cold, calculated decision. All of it built on the murder of the one person who had loved her without conditions, designed by the man she had trusted most. She pressed her forehead against the wall. The stone was cold. Everything was cold. Except the faint warm pulse in her chest that was not hers, the single steady drum of a human heart, beating from 3 decks away, beating because a man had survived a venom designed to kill him, beating because he had spent the morning saving simulated lives, beating because somewhere along the way, her cellular chemistry had decided that this was the rhythm her own hearts would orient toward. She closed her eyes. She held the warmth. She let it hold her. 3 decks above her, a red alarm began to pulse, then another, then another. The bioluminescent vein shifted from gold to deep arterial red. The corridor lights dimmed. A low hum rose through the deck plates, the kind of hum that meant something very large was about to go very wrong. The ship-wide comm crackled. Vorik's voice. Sharp. Tight. Wound around a fear she had not heard in him in 2 decades. Empress. The Elder Council's personal guard has turned. Decks 4 through 7 are compromised. The Crimson Veil has cells embedded throughout the ship. They are moving toward the bridge. A pause. Static. The faint sound of distant pulse rifle fire. They are moving toward the human. Kaelira pushed herself off the wall. The trembling stopped. The grief stopped. The doubt stopped. All of it compressed into a single white-hot point of clarity that burned away everything except what mattered. Elias. She had lost her mother to Mathar's ambition. She had lost her childhood to his doctrine. She had lost 20 years to his design. She would not. She would not. She would not lose this. Her eyes were not violet. They were not black. In the pulsing red light of the emergency alarms, they were beginning to glow. Blue. She began to run. The obsidian dawn was bleeding. Kaelira felt it in her bones, not through the alarms, not through the comm, through something older. The way a captain feels a ship taking water. The way a mother knows the cry of her own child in a crowded room. She ran, living armor at full velocity. A dark blur through corridors that had not seen her move this fast in 20 years. Crew members flattened themselves against the walls, not because she ordered them to, because the sight of the Empress in full sprint was something the body registered as weather. As avalanche, as a thing you did not stand in front of. She did not take the main corridors, because the main corridors were where the mutineers would be. She took the auxiliary shaft, the one she had ordered built during construction, the one she had then made the engineers forget, the one that ran through the reactor housing. Narrow, hot, smelling of coolant and metal and the ancient warmth of a fusion core that was older than she was. She dropped 3 levels in controlled descent, her claws scoring parallel lines in the metal as she braked. The reactor's heat pressed against the wall like a second pulse. She emerged on deck 7. The corridor was empty, but the fighting was close. She could hear it. Above her, the staccato bark of pulse rifles, the heavier thud of concussion charges, The sharp Zentari battle cries of soldiers killing soldiers who had been comrades 12 hours ago. She turned the corner. She found him. He was not hiding. Of course he was not hiding. Elias Wren was standing in the corridor outside the medical bay. He had built a barricade, with surgical gurneys, with equipment carts, with the broken half of a supply cabinet someone had probably needed for something. He had created a choke point. He had funneled it down to 3 feet. Behind him, 3 wounded Zentari soldiers lay on the deck, their injuries dressed, their breathing steady. Triaged in the order that humans triage, and Zentari did not. He was holding a plasma cutter, a surgical tool designed to cut through chitin plate during emergency surgery, in his hands. Pointed down the corridor, it became a declaration. He weighed maybe 180 pounds. He wore no armor. He had no tavaning. He had no reasonable hope of stopping a squad of armed mutineers. He was going to stop them anyway. Or he was going to die trying. He looked up. He saw her. His face was pale, drawn tight with adrenaline. A bruise was forming on his left cheekbone, where debris from an explosion had struck him. But his eyes were clear. He smiled. A small, tired, wry, impossible smile. Took you long enough? Something moved in her chest, not the bond. Something older. Something that had nothing to do with biology. You built a barricade. I built a barricade. Out of surgical equipment. I work with what I have. He glanced back at the wounded. 2 of them can still fight. The 3rd has a punctured secondary lung. I need about an hour before I can stabilize him enough to move. She stepped over the gurney. She did not look at the wounded. She did not look at the barricade. She looked at him. Her dark, ridged, dangerous hand reached out. She did not touch his face. She did not touch his neck. She found his free hand and closed her clawed fingers around it, her armor against his skin, her dual hearts against his single one. She felt his pulse skip once, then lock in, a steady thrum that traveled up her arm, through her chest, into the place where the bond lived. "Stay behind me," she said. "No." The word stopped her. Not the volume. The certainty. He stepped out from behind the barricade. He stood beside her, the plasma cutter in his hand, his shoulder almost touching her forearm. The Empress in living battle armor, next to a man in blood-stained scrubs, holding a modified surgical tool. The contrast was absurd. She had stopped finding it absurd. "I don't hide behind people," he said, quietly. "Not even empresses." She felt her dual heart synchronize with something that was not her own cardiac rhythm, a human pulse, finding the space between her 2 beats, filling it. "Then stand beside me," she said. The mutineers came 4 minutes later, a squad of 12, the black and silver insignia of the Elder Council's personal guard. They moved in tactical formation. They were well trained. They were well armed. They were utterly unprepared. The squad leader rounded the corner. He saw the Empress. He saw the human. He saw their hands. He hesitated. That hesitation cost him, because a voice came from behind his formation. "Stand down." Commander Vorik stepped out of the side corridor, 15 soldiers with him, visors down, weapons up. trained on the mutineers' backs. The squad turned, caught between the Empress ahead and Vorik behind. 12 weapons. 15 weapons. The arithmetic was suddenly very simple. "Commander," the squad leader said, his voice tight. "The Elder Council has declared the Empress unfit. The succession protocols. You know them. I know them." Vorik raised his visor. His eyes were not the eyes of a commander. They were the eyes of a brother whose only sibling was alive because a stranger had refused to walk past pain. "I do not serve the Council. I do not serve the throne. I serve a debt that cannot be repaid. And tonight, that debt belongs to Dr. Elias Wren." The formation cracked, one by one. Weapons lowered, not all of them. 3 holdouts kept their rifles raised. The zealots, the believers, the ones who would die for the cause. 9 rifles hit the floor. The 3 were subdued in seconds. The corridor went quiet. The Empress did not let go of the human's hand. Vorik approached. He looked at their hands. He did not comment. "Decks 4 through 7 are being retaken, but the Crimson Veil has fortified the bridge. Approximately 40 soldiers. They control weapons, atmosphere, navigation." He paused. Heavier this time. "They have Mathar." "Willingly, no. They pulled him from his quarters. It appears the extremists have decided the Elder's usefulness has expired. They have issued a demand. You abdicate, or they vent the atmosphere on every deck below the bridge. 6,000 crew." The number hung in the red-lit corridor like a sentence of death. 6,000. Soldiers, technicians, engineers, medics, cooks, the night watch, the day crew, the kitchen staff, the cleaners, Vesca. 6,000 lives. Elias squeezed her hand. She felt his mind shift. The bond translated it. Not in words. In texture. In the change of his pulse. The slight tilt of his head. He had moved into the gear that most people did not have. The doctor gear. The one where the panic stops and the math starts. "The atmospheric processors," he said. "How are they controlled?" Vorik frowned at him. "Central Command. On the bridge." "What about filtration?" "Separate circuit. Biological contamination protocol. Designed to function even if the main system is compromised. Hospital-grade isolation logic." Elias closed his eyes. Kaelira watched him. Vorik watched him. The math was happening behind his eyelids, and it was happening very fast. "Then we don't need the bridge." Kaelira stared at him. "Explain." "The filtration system has biological authority over the atmospheric processors, because in a contamination event, air quality trumps everything. The bridge cannot override a contamination protocol. The protocol exists above their command authority. So you want to trigger a contamination alert. I want to make the ship believe there is a real biological threat in the air. The system will lock the processors into decontamination mode automatically. It will vent the threat. Cycle clean air. The Crimson Veil will lose their leverage on the bridge consoles. They will be neutralized without a single shot. And the threat." He looked at her. He did not look away. "I have to put it in the air." The Empress went very still. The kind of still that was not actually stillness. The kind of still that was a held storm. You will need to enter the filtration chamber, personally. Yes. And introduce a biological agent. Yes. Potent enough to fool the sensors, but not lethal. Yes. And the person standing in the chamber when it releases. We'll be in there for 90 seconds to ensure full distribution. Yes. Define, for a human, 90 seconds of that exposure. He did not blink. Survivable, probably, with immediate medical treatment. Probably. Welcome to field medicine, Empress. Probably is the best we get. She wanted to say no. Every cell in her body wanted to say no. She had just learned what it felt like to grieve. She did not want to find out what it felt like to lose him. She looked at the wounded soldiers behind the barricade. 3 of them. Their faces young. Their breathing shallow but steady because he had been there. She thought of 6,000. She thought of Veska. She thought of the cook with the burned hand, the guard with the new baby, the bridge officer who had brought her coffee that morning before everything went wrong. She thought of her mother, Leora, who had walked these corridors and learned every name. She thought of what her mother would have done. She closed her eyes. She did not. She did not. She did not say no. She said, Vorek, take a squad. Secure Deck 12. Clear a path to the filtration control node. Empress, if he dies in that chamber, the shield kin bond. I know what happens. Go. Vorek hesitated for half a second. The first half second of hesitation she had ever seen from him. Then he saluted, bowed his head, turned. He took his soldiers and ran. The Deck 12 corridor was empty. Vorek had cleared it before they arrived. The filtration chamber stood at the end of the hall, a cylindrical room 30 feet in diameter, ringed with intake vents. The air inside was cold, sterile, humming with the low vibration of industrial fans that pushed breathable atmosphere to every corner of the ship. Standing in it felt like standing inside a mechanical lung. I had synthesized the agent in 20 minutes. In the medical bay, a modified Terran influenza strain, stripped of its reproductive capability, amplified for sensor detection. It would trigger every biological alarm on the ship. It would make anyone exposed feel like they had a severe flu for 6 hours. It would save 6,000 lives, but the concentration in a sealed chamber was different. A different math, a different body. And mine had been through a venom trial, and 6 hours of surgery, and the trial of mind, and almost no sleep for 3 days. I knew the math. I did not say the math. I stopped just inside the chamber door. I turned. Kaelira stood on the other side of the reinforced glass. She could not come in. Her Zentari biology would metabolize the agent before it reached the sensors. The contamination would be neutralized before the protocol could trigger. It had to be done by a human. The only human on the ship. I held the canister. I looked at her through the glass. Her eyes were not violet. Her eyes were not black. In the cold light of the chamber, in the panic blue glow of the emergency systems, I swear her eyes were beginning to glow. A color I did not have a word for. A color that did not exist. Listen to me, I said. The comm in the door panel carried my voice through to her side. 60 seconds. Then you open this door. The sensors need 90. The sensors will work faster. 60. Not negotiable. Elias, there's something I need to tell you. Her hands pressed flat against the glass, black claws against reinforced transparency. Tell me. I did not come to Helix 9 because they sent me there. She went still. I chose it. What? I was offered 3 other stations after my exile. 3. All of them. Easier, warmer, closer to home. I turned all of them down. Why? I swallowed. I had not said this out loud to anyone, not once in 12 years. 12 years ago, I saved a little girl. She was 4 years old. She had been pulled from the wreckage of a civilian transport on the Zentari frontier. The admiral on duty told me to let her die. I did not let her die. I lost my career. I know. You know, the career part. You don't know the other part. The chamber was cold around me. The canister was warm in my hand. Her name is Sayla. She lives on a small mining moon. She is 16 years old. I have written her a letter every month for 12 years. She writes back. Sometimes. When she remembers. Helix 9 is the closest outpost to her system. That's why I chose it. The mail runs from Helix 9 reached her hub in 4 days. From anywhere else, they would have taken 3 weeks. I looked at the Empress through the glass. She wants to be a doctor. She told me last month. She wants to learn cardiac surgery. She wants to come to a Terran university. She wants to know if I will help. I have spent 12 years making sure that a little girl on a mining moon knows that someone is still thinking about her. Because I could not bear the idea of her growing up thinking the universe had forgotten her name. That is the kind of man you are bonded to. I just wanted you to know. Before I stopped. I could not finish the sentence. I did not need to. She wept. Quietly. Black hands against the glass. Black hair against the reinforced steel. The most feared woman in the galaxy. Weeping for an exiled medic she had known for 6 days. Open the valve, she whispered. Empress. Open the valve, Elias. I love you. I had not meant to say it. It came out the way the tears had come out 2 nights ago in the observation deck. The way the warmth had come out in the medical bay on the outpost. The way the truth comes out when it has been waiting too long inside a body too tired to hold it. She did not say it back. She did not need to. Her eyes were glowing. Blue, like a star being born. Open the valve. I opened the valve. The agent dispersed. A fine aerosol mist filled the chamber, like fog rolling in from a cold sea. I breathed it in. I had to. There was no choice. It hit my bloodstream in 4 seconds. The first 30 seconds were tolerable. The shoulders tightened. The breathing changed. The lungs began to feel like they were full of cotton. At 30 seconds, the contamination sensors activated. Red lights flooded the chamber. Alarms screamed through the deck. The filtration system overrode the bridge at 45 seconds. The atmospheric processors locked into decontamination mode across the entire ship. Clean air cycled through every deck. The Crimson Veil watched their leverage evaporate on their own display screens. Their leverage was gone. The corridor cameras would later show what happened on the bridge. Vorek's secondary force breached. 3 minutes. 40 mutineers. 36 surrendered. 4 did not. The 4 were given the mercy of quick deaths. Mathar was found bound to a command chair, beaten, conscious, alive. But all of that was the bridge. In the filtration chamber, I was on my knees. At 50 seconds, my body began to fail. Not survive. Fail. I had underestimated the concentration. Or the chamber had pressurized the agent beyond my calculation. Or my body. Tired. Stressed. Already poisoned by the venom 3 days ago. Had simply run out of reserves. My knees buckled. My hands hit the cold floor. My heart skipped. Skipped. Stopped. For 1 second. Or 1 century. I could not tell. I felt it happen. I felt the moment a doctor knows. The moment when the body says, "This is the part where I am going to fail." I thought of Selah. I thought of her last letter. I thought of how she had drawn a picture of her favorite cat at the bottom of the page. I thought of how I had not yet written back to tell her that of course I would help her become a doctor. I thought of Marin, my sister. My sister at 12 years old, calling for me down the hallway of the house we had grown up in, asking if I would read to her. I thought of my father. I thought of how tired he had been. I thought of all the people I had not saved. I thought of all the people I had. I thought of an Empress with eyes that were just beginning to learn the color blue. I thought, I am so sorry. I was not done. At 60 seconds, the door of the filtration chamber came off. It did not open. It came off. The reinforced steel frame tore free of the bulkhead. I would learn later that the impact had cracked 3 structural ribs of the chamber. The door had weighed 800 kilograms. It had been bolted in 12 places with industrial fasteners rated for vacuum. None of that had mattered. She came through it. I felt her before I saw her, her armor against the contaminated air. The Zentari biology already neutralizing the agent for her. Her hands on my shoulders, on my chest, lifting me, cradling me, pulling me out of the cold poison of the chamber and into the warmth of her body. She was on her knees. I was on hers. My head was against her chest. I could hear her dual hearts. 1, 2. 1, 2. Both of them. Slowing. The shieldkin bond did something it was not supposed to do. It reversed. Not because she made a conscious decision. Not because she had read the archive entry. Not because anyone had ever done this and lived. But because her cellular chemistry refused to let mine fail. Energy began to flow. From her body into mine. Through the points of contact. Through the bond. Through whatever ancient mechanism 3 centuries of Zentari evolution had built into the royal bloodline. A surge of biological power pouring into me, filling cracks, restarting systems, forcing my heart to beat, forcing my lungs to breathe, forcing my cells to fight. I felt it. I felt her give. Not a metaphor, a literal transfer. She was draining. Her internal reactor was bleeding itself dry to keep me alive. I tried to lift my hand. I tried to push her away. I tried to say, no. I could not move. I could not speak. I could only feel her arms around me, tight, trembling, steady. She felt her own power leaving her. She felt it the way you feel a fire dying, the way you feel a furnace running cold, the way you feel strength you had carried for a lifetime begin to spool out of you and into someone else. She had ruled 67 star systems with that strength. She had crushed 2 rebellions with it. She had built an empire with it. She did not care. She did not pause. She did not negotiate. Because beneath the loss, beneath the diminishment, she could feel his heart growing stronger, steadying, finding its rhythm. That heart that had no business being as stubborn as it was. That kept going, not because it was designed to survive, because it simply refused to stop. His eyes opened. His face was still gray, drawn, wet with sweat, wet with something else. His hand came up, trembling. His thumb traced the ridge of her jaw, the line of her natural armor, with a gentleness that made the last of her resistance dissolve. "You're glowing." His voice was ruined, a rasp. "Your eyes, they're not black anymore." She could feel it, the warmth behind her irises, the color she had never produced, the color no Zentari in recorded history had ever produced. She did not need a mirror. She could see it reflected in his eyes. Blue. "What does blue mean?" he whispered. She searched her memory. Violet for authority, black for recognition, gold for maternal love. The color her mother's eyes had glowed in the nursery. The color she had not seen in 20 years. But blue. Blue was not in the archives. Blue had no precedent. "I do not know. It has never existed before." He smiled. Faint, tired, real. "Then we get to decide what it means." The retaking of the bridge was over before they reached the medical bay. I learned that part later. I was unconscious for most of it. The Crimson Veil had collapsed without their atmospheric leverage. Most surrendered. The hardliners were dealt with. Mathar was found, bound, beaten, alive. He had refused to legitimize the coup. They had asked him to use his authority to declare the Empress unfit. He had refused. They had beaten him until he could not stand. He had still refused. He had still refused. I did not know what to do with that. I would think about it later. For now, I was being carried through corridors that smelled like ozone and smoke and the slow returning sweetness of clean air, past crew members who pressed themselves against the walls and bowed, not because she ordered them to, because the sight of the Empress carrying the human had unmade some part of their understanding of the universe. She did not let me go. Not when the medics arrived with a gurney. Not when they begged her to lay me down. Not when Vorek came running through the corridor with his visor up and his face raw and exhausted and saying, "Empress, please, let them do their work." She did not let me go until we reached the Imperial Medical Suite on Deck 3. And even then, she sat by the bed for 6 hours, conducting the business of the Empire from a chair too small for her body, while I dreamed of a little girl on a mining moon who wanted to be a doctor. 3 days later, they brought a smaller chair. I was conscious by then. Weak, bruised, wrong feeling in 100 small ways, but conscious. The Zentari nurses had recalibrated the room for my biology. The temperature had been lowered 3 degrees. The monitors had been adjusted to handle a single human heart. The bed was still too large. There was no fixing that. Kaelira sat in the chair beside me. She was smaller. I could see it, in the way she carried her shoulders, in the way her breathing was slightly shallower, in the way her armor sat on her body, like it did not quite fit anymore. 20%. She had given me 20% of her biological capacity. Permanent. Unrecoverable. I had asked the Zentari physicians. They had told me. They had told me with the careful tone of medical professionals who do not know how to deliver. Thus, the news that an Empress has chosen a human over her own strength. I looked at her. She looked at me. "You should not have done that," I said. "I know." "You are diminished." "I know." "For me, you will never be." "I know." She reached out, took my hand, the way I had taken hers on the observation deck, across the inches. "Do you regret it?" I asked. "No." "Not even?" "No." A long pause. The monitor beeped. Steady, indifferent, holy. Elias. I spent 20 years being the strongest thing in the galaxy. It did not make me safe. It did not make me happy. It did not bring my mother back. It did not give me a single person I could trust. She squeezed my hand. "And then you put your hand on my neck and told me I was okay, and I have been deciding what to do with that. Ever since." The investigation continued in silence. While I recovered, Kaelira worked. She personally examined every recovered file from the Crimson Veil. She read every transcript, every encoded message, every financial trail. She found Mathar's 10-year history of funding. She found the names of the extremist cells. She found the soldiers who had been turned. And in a sealed, encrypted file, buried so deep it had taken 3 nights to crack. She found something else, a photograph, a small Zentari girl, 4 years old, sitting on the edge of a hospital bed. Her secondary lung had been punctured. Her eyes were closed. She was so pale she was almost translucent. A human doctor was holding her hand. The human was 23 years old. He looked exhausted. He was wearing scrubs that did not fit. His hair was a mess. There was blood on his sleeve. The girl's name was written on the back of the photograph. Selah. Below the name, a small line of handwriting, in Leora's hand. "This child." From the orphan program. Pulled from the wreckage 3 weeks ago. Adoption guardian Empress Leora of the Zentari Dominion. Trust fund established. Quiet. No public record. She is loved. Kaelira sat at the data terminal. She stared at the photograph for a long time. She did not weep. She had wept already. She traced the image of the little girl with one clawed finger. This child. Her mother had been sponsoring orphans from the Zentari frontier. Children whose families had been killed in the brief, ugly border conflict with the Terran Federation. Quietly. Off the books. With private funds. Because the throne would not officially recognize a refugee program. Leora had been protecting them. Mathar had killed Leora. And 20 years later, a human doctor, a man Leora would never meet, had pulled one of her quietly sponsored children from the wreckage of a transport and refused to let her die, and been exiled for it, and chosen an outpost just to keep mailing letters to her. The dots connected, not by destiny, not by fate, by a mother who had started a small good thing 20 years ago, and kept starting it, until the small good thing had quietly survived her death, and had quietly become a network, and had quietly carried one little girl to a hospital cot, where a tired, exhausted human had quietly refused to walk away. Lyora's work had outlived her. It had carried itself, hand to hand, through 20 years, across light years, through wreckage and exile, and one terrible single dislocated shoulder, until it found her daughter, until it brought her daughter the man. Kaelira closed the file. She did not tell anyone about it. Not Vorik, not the council, not even Elias. Not yet. She filed it with the journal, in the small private archive she had begun to build, in the place where her mother's voice lived, in the place where the warmth of a human hand had been allowed. She would tell him. Someday, when they were both ready. Mathar was sentenced 1 week later. Kaelira stood in the throne room. The full council was assembled, the senior officers, the press correspondents from 67 star systems. The entire galaxy had been watching. The galaxy expected execution. 20 years of fear demanded it. She did not give it to them. She stood from the throne. Her armor was different now. She had reduced it. Lighter plates. Less of it. The high collar was gone. The soft scales of her neck were visible to the room. It was a small choice. It said everything. Elder Mathar will not be executed. The room rippled. He will be exiled to the outer rim, stripped of rank, stripped of title, stripped of council authority. He will live with what he did. He will die alone. He will be remembered, not as a traitor, as a lesson. She let that settle. I was taught that compassion was weakness. I was taught that mercy was a luxury. I was taught that fear was the only currency a throne could spend. I was taught wrong. She looked at Mathar. He could not meet her eyes. My mother taught the opposite. She taught that love was not a weakness, that gentleness was the only strength that survives anything. The man who killed her tried to bury that lesson with her. He failed. The Dominion will stand, but it will stand differently. It will stand because its people choose it, not because they are afraid of what happens if they don't. There was a long silence. Then, Vorik. Vorik, who had never shown emotion in front of subordinates, slammed his fist against his chest plate in the Zentari salute and bowed, not protocol, a real bow, one by one. The entire room followed. Kaelira watched them, not in terror, in something that finally felt earned. A month later, they found me in the medical bay. I had reorganized the entire surgical suite. Twice. The Zentari medics had stopped trying to stop me. They had started taking notes. They had begun to follow me around like very tall, well-armored interns. I was teaching them the surgical bypass technique that had saved Corvin. They had named it the Wren bypass. I had told them, repeatedly, to name it something else. Anything else. Basic structural engineering. The coffee method. I don't know why nobody thought of this before method. They had ignored me. The Wren bypass it was. Corvin had been promoted, bridge officer to bridge lieutenant. He still walked with a slight stiffness on his left side. He brought me coffee twice a week. He never said thank you. Zentari did not. He did not need to. The Empress came to the medical bay. She came alone. She was not wearing her armor. She wore a simple tunic. Zentari silk, dark blue. Her soft scales visible at the collar. Her arms bare. The delicate scales along her wrists catching the medical bay lights. The medic suddenly became very busy at a supply cabinet on the far side of the room. I set down my coffee. She stopped in front of me, her blue eyes steady. "You once told me you do not belong to me." "I did. You were correct. You do not belong to me. But I find, after considerable reflection, that I would like to belong to you, in whatever way you are willing to have me." The medics were very, very busy at the supply cabinet. I stood up. I walked across the floor. I stopped in front of her. "You know?" "I know what?" "On Helix 9, when your guards came through the airlock, I had one thought. I thought, my coffee is going to get cold." She made the sound, the low vibration in her chest. She did not suppress it this time. She laughed. A real laugh. "And now I think about a lot of things. I think about Corvin walking around with a piece of human medicine in his chest. I think about every Zentari who sees him and wonders what else humans might know that nobody has thought to ask. I think about an observation deck on a warship with the best view in the galaxy. I think about an Empress who built it, because she needed to remember that beautiful things exist. And I reached up. I placed my hand on the back of her neck. The same spot, the same place, the thumb against the softer scales, the warmth. And I think the coffee is still getting cold, and some things never change. And maybe that's okay. She leaned down. She rested her forehead against mine. Her eyes closed. Mine closed too. Her dual hearts beat against my single one, finding the rhythm we had been searching for, since a flickering outpost on the edge of nowhere, since a hand on a neck, since a whisper, since a dislocated shoulder, since 6 years old, since the gold of her mother's eyes in a nursery, since the silence of an empty house where a young man waited alone in a kitchen for the police to arrive. A rhythm that was not Zentari, that was not human, that was something new, a color blue. That had never existed. That evening, we sat on the observation deck, 2 cups of coffee on the bench between us. The nebula turned, patient, ancient, unconcerned with the small upheavals of empires. She told me about her mother. She told me about the journal. She told me about the night before the coup. She told me about the gold of Leora's eyes, the lullaby, the arm around a 6-year-old shoulder. I told her about Marin, about my father, about the kitchen I had waited in alone. I told her that I had not said any of this out loud in 18 years. She told me she had not cried in 20. We had each broken a long silence, for each other, the way 2 strangers had broken every protocol of a 1,000-year-old empire. By touching, by accident, by the irrational, fundamental, beautifully stubborn human refusal to walk past someone in pain. I leaned back against the viewport. She rested her head against my shoulder. Carefully, The way you wrest something fragile, even though she was the one who could crush a planet. Even though I was the one who could not lift a chair without my left side cramping. We were a contradiction. We were a category error. We were an empress and an exile and a galaxy that was already beginning to rearrange itself around the impossibility of us. The nebula turned. The reactor hummed. The ship lived. Elias. Yes. What does blue mean? I thought about it. For a long time. I think it means beginning. She did not answer right away. When she did, her voice was soft. I think you are right. I think it means I have never been this version of myself before, and neither has anyone in my bloodline. I think it means that something new is possible. Something that was not possible before you put your hand on my neck and told me I was okay. I closed my eyes. I felt her warmth against my side. I felt the dual rhythm of her hearts. Slower now, permanently slower, because of what she had given. For me, I would spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift. I had a feeling. I had a feeling I would have the time. Because somewhere on a mining moon, a 16-year-old girl named Selah was reading my latest letter, the one where I told her, yes, I will help you become a doctor, the one where I told her about an empress who had cried, about a mother who had loved her, about a journal that had been waiting 20 years to be found, about a small good thing that a kind woman had started, long before any of us knew her name. The coffee was getting cold. It was the best coffee I had ever tasted. Kielera reached for her cup, her clawed fingers wrapped around the mug. Carefully, the way you wrap your hand around something delicate, even though her hand had never been the delicate one in this story. She took a small sip. She made a face. It is cold. I told you. You did. Some things never change. And maybe. She set the mug down. She looked at me. Her eyes glowed blue, the color of beginnings. Maybe. That is okay. She leaned over. She pressed her forehead against mine. And somewhere in the back of her mind, in the small private place where she kept the things that mattered most, a lullaby. Faint, distant. But there, after 20 years of silence, finally, there, the nebula turned, the ship lived, and the coffee, for the record, was excellent.